Joining me now to discuss this, where things stand really at this hour, CNN chief congressional correspondent Monterraju and former Republican congressman from Texas, Will Hurd. Congressman, just your take on kind of this moment where we are. Lauren laid out the option being considered and discussed is either have a vote again when they reconvene at noon, supposedly, or push it off another day for if Kevin McCarthy can even get people to agree to that. Which one sounds like a better option to you right now?
Well, I think neither of them sound like good options, and I have to step back and say it's shocking to me that the fringe minority that is holding this up, they must have been on vacation in November and didn't see the outcome of the elections in 2022. The American voters said very clearly they wanted people to fight for them to solve problems on the horizon, like inflation, border security, China, and not this. And this notion that Democrats are going to help Kevin McCarthy right now, they were giddy on the floor yesterday. President Biden is excited to be in Kentucky today to show contrast to this. And I don't call this this fringe minority. I call them a fringe minority because they say they want conservative things to happen in Congress, but the only thing they're doing is helping liberals show the country that, hey, this was a potentially bad decision because these folks may not be able to govern.
Manu, what are you hearing behind the scenes of what the risk reward is if McCarthy pushes this off another day?
This is the debate that's happening right now behind the scenes. In fact, I just talked to one of the members who's involved in those discussions, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. He's one of the more moderate members of the conference, but he has been having some of the discussions with some of the detractors, some of the McCarthy opponents. Over the last day, that's been the discussion, trying to understand what those opponents need to get to yes. They're trying to put together some sort of offer, some sort of proposal that they could then present to the rest of the conference, see if the rest of the conference agrees with some of the changes that they want, which include giving them essentially more power, giving those rank and file members, those far right members, key committee assignments, potentially giving them more power to use leverage over the speakership. Some of those changes that are currently being discussed. The question, though, is can the rest of the conference agree to that? Which is why there has been active discussions all day long about whether they can try to delay today's vote for another day. They want more time to have those discussions play out in order to get a deal, because the real fear among the McCarthy allies, I should say, is that he will lose votes on the fourth ballot. He could go from 20 to maybe 21, maybe even beyond. And if he does, that will undercut any ability to showcase that he's regaining momentum. And that is a real risk for him in trying to achieve 218 votes. And in talking to McCarthy allies, they believe he still is the only one who can ultimately get there in this razor-thin Republican majority, which is why at the moment they say this is the only option. Get some sort of deal, get everyone on board. But the problem for McCarthy is not everyone's on board.
But Congressman, one thing that we do know is that, on the most basic level, what the holdouts, if you want to call them that, or the fringe as you were calling that, what they want is more power. We know that, and lots of different motivations for what they want to do with that power, how they want to wield that power. But in the end, do you think Kevin McCarthy can still pull this off, knowing what you know?
I don't think so. Here's two things I do know, and I'm sure Manu is hearing this up on the Hill, that Kevin McCarthy is not going to blink, and these 20 or so fringe minority is not going to blink either. What's going to ultimately be required to get through this standstill is some leader to emerge out of the conference to say, listen, this is not good for the conference. This is not good for the institution. This is not good for the country. And we need to find who can lead this. And let's be clear, the motivations of these 20 folks, their stated motivations is they want additional power. But in reality, all they want to do is throw bombs. And so this notion that, and they probably don't care who the compromise candidate is because they won, they got the eyeballs on their social media pages, they got on cable news to talk about these things. And we can see them, come around and coalesce around someone like a Steve Scalise or someone else.
Monty, what are you hearing about who that other candidate could be? The one thing that we have learned, Don Bacon was on with Jim Sciutto just a little while ago, and he was saying that there are preliminary conversations with Democrats about a consensus candidate. I think we should all say very clearly that everything that is uttered in public when it's coming from Capitol Hill right now might be part of a negotiating tactic. How real are preliminary conversations?
It is very unlikely that that will ultimately play out here, in large part because Democrats, I'd say that they're going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries on every single ballot. It's hard to see some sort of moderate Republican being the ultimate choice of some Democrats and get some enough support from Republicans. So that is a very far-fetched scenario, but it really just underscores, I should say, the unprecedented nature of sorts of the situation that we're in. Yes, this happened 100 years ago, but in the modern era, this has not happened. We are really in a situation with no playbook. And while people are trying to figure out what the alternative is, there is no clear alternative. The congressman mentioned Steve Scalise, someone who has been mentioned potentially as someone who could emerge. But even he would have some problems as well, not just because there are some skeptics among some of the more moderate members, but the deals that McCarthy cut to get to the try to get the votes. Some of those more moderate members who are aligned with Kevin McCarthy say they won't support those concessions if there's another speaker candidate. So those are discussions will have to play out. You can't just come up with another candidate there's no consensus candidate like a Paul Ryan was back in 2015 when McCarthy at that time stepped aside and Ryan succeeded John Boehner. That doesn't quite exist in today's Republican conference, which is the real challenge that they face going forward in this majority where only 4 votes, if there are more than 4 votes, that could scuttle anyone's speaker's bid. A lot of questions ahead, and whether today McCarthy can get there still seems doubtful at the moment.
And Congressman, knowing all that, what does this mean for the next 2 years of this Republican majority?
Look, what this means is that we're going to consistently give victories to the left if we don't show an ability to govern. If we can't, if the government shuts down, if we don't do a deal with a debt ceiling increase, if we don't address, look, the technology is moving so fast. And there's a need for regulation, and we need to make sure that we're preparing our kids for the future. And Congress has a role in that, and not being able to focus on those things, it falls by the wayside. But one of the lessons we got to take away from this is the situation that Kevin McCarthy is in right now is of his own making. I don't think Kevin McCarthy, if this doesn't happen for him, which it seems unlikely, is not a martyr. The fact that he tried to negotiate with this fringe element, sometimes to the detriment of his allies. I think he would love for Peter Meyer and Liz Cheney and Jamie Herrera Butler to be back in Congress, but he didn't do the things necessary to keep them there.
Really interesting point, and quite a list of names to remember right now in this moment for sure. Congressman, great to see you. Thanks for coming on. Manu, keep it up. Thanks, buddy.